English translation, 279th contact. Thursday, 3rd February, 2000. So part 40 hours.
May the new year bring you much happiness and joy. Greetings, my dear friend. Also, my two daughters Simyase and Plaja, as well as all others you know, greet you and send you the best wishes through me.
Thank you for the lovely greeting and all the wishes, which I assume are not only related to my birthday.
That is right.
Well then, may I come straight to my accumulated questions that have arisen again in the course of time?
Of course.
Thank you. My first question refers to the Tower of Babylon, which was built about 3,000 years ago or so ago. Do you know anything about this event?
Not very detailed, but a little.
Well, then the first question. What was the height and baseline of the building?
The baseline was about 91 meters, which was also identical to the height of the building.
So also 91 meters high. As far as I know, the building was square, as you can see from your measurements of the baseline.
That is correct. But the building did not correspond to a cube, but it narrowed upwards by several set-offs or floors, which were connected by stairs only in the outer wall areas. In the middle, the whole building was filled with a core of fired brick mass which ensured stability. The outer brickwork was made of bricks or fired bricks which, like the core, were made of the same material. A large temple was erected on the uppermost settlement, which played a special role for the deity Marduk, and in which a temple servant lived, who was only allowed to be visited and touched by the ruler. Marduk was the city god of Babylon and was raised to the highest imperial god around 1700 BC. The Marduk cult was led by a very powerful priesthood, which in itself was very diverse.
The Bible mentions the history of the confusion of languages during the construction of the tower. What was it about?
The explanation of the Bible is wrong. Truthfully, the tower was built by various groups of people who had many different languages and could only communicate with each other through language experts. When a serious natural event occurred and the different ethnic groups mixed in fear and panic, it naturally happened that the confused, horrified people fleeing from the building could no longer communicate with each other because no one understood the other's language and each belonged to a different ethnic group.
So the confusion was perfect.
So it happened, yes.
Our witness book. Which format should we use? A5, so normal book size about, or A4, like typewriter page size or something bigger?
Normal book size because this is the handiest and most comfortable.
Then A5, of course. Next question. Is the photo book a little larger than A4 also okay?
Yes, but we clarified that earlier.
I know, but I want it written in the contact report this time.
I did not know that. So be it.
Then I would like to ask again officially about the state of affairs concerning the destroyer. When I asked you more than a year ago, you explained that you wanted to get this wandering planet out of the Sol system after all.
That is right. We have made efforts in this direction. So the destroyer is no longer a danger to the Earth and all the other planets of the Sol system, because it is already moving in the direction of the Oort's cloud to leave the system for good, and out into free space to such an extent that it cannot come close to any stars or planets for millions of years. Since there were first concerns that we would intervene unjustifiably in cosmic processes by such an action, this decision came only now or less than 1 year ago. Also, extremely lengthy calculations had to be mastered, by which a large security is given that the Wanderer can cause no more mischief during many millions of years. The danger is now averted, therefore also prophecies related to it have become obsolete.
Nice to hear. So one danger less of all those which are still threatening from space.
Of course, there are still dangers from meteors, asteroids, and comets, but nothing should be overrated.
You also work in the form of the ultra-subatomic technologies, as well as in the neural technologies, etc., whereby you also create artificial intelligences, which further develop themselves and create their own intelligence, and thus can also be creative. Is there not a danger that such intelligences can get out of control, as is always the case in science fiction novels, for example?
No, this danger does not exist. Because our technologies are so aligned that an artificial intelligence eliminates itself if it falls into any of the degenerations and violations of laws that we have established. The security of self-elimination is in the range of 100%. In addition, everything is formed in such a manner that degenerations and violations of the law are impossible from the ground up, so that self-elimination of artificial intelligence is only a final safeguard for all cases.
To learn more about this, I mean in terms of function, etc., is probably not possible?
Right.
But can one ask whether the ultra-subatomic technology is the latest trend in your development?
No, because parts of our technology and development are moving into much deeper areas that are still below the quark levels.
Silence about that too, right?
Yes.
Then a question relating to life forms on Earth. All in all, how many do you know?
You have to wait a moment because I do not know this data, so I have to retrieve it. A moment. Here, at present, we know of 2.234 million, although not all the life forms that ultimately exist on Earth are known. But may I now ask a question myself?
Of course.
Your hand, which was struck by lightning, are you still feeling pain?
Sporadically, yes. Then only smearing and ointments help, especially when I can hardly move my hand anymore.
The nerves were affected.
That is what the doctor said. But that is not so important, which is why I would like to move on to the next question about natural disasters. I have an article here that you should read, and I want to know what you think.
You can read it to me.
Also good. So, what do you think?
The above is broadly factual, but it also contains 2 or 3 errors. The year 1998 was not the warmest year of the second millennium, because there were several other years with much warmer temperatures. This is also true for the 20th century 1947. If other meteorological records exist for these times, they are not only deficient, but extremely erroneous.
It is interesting that you mention the year 1947, because I remember very well that there was an unusually hot summer that brought temperatures above 40 degrees. From spring to autumn, it practically did not rain anymore, and after that there were tremendous hailstorms, with egg and tennis ball-sized hail knocking the branches from the trees in various places. Before this happened, however, many fruit trees blossomed some again and sometimes produced fruit again. I can remember that the fruits did not grow and could not ripen. But there was a sugar pear tree, which I saw bloom twice during this year. I was only 10 years old at the time, and bear fruit that could be eaten again because it grew and ripened well.
My father also told me about this, so your story is not alien to me.
Of course. I might have guessed, because I picked some of the sugar pears of the second harvest, about the size of a thumbnail, for Sfath, too. But tell me, do you know anything about Tutankhamun?
Certainly. What do you want to know?
He was elevated to pharaoh at the age of 9, and then suddenly died a few years later. The question relates to what he died of, and how old he really was then. I am also interested in who his real parents were.
Tutankhamun did not die a natural death, for on the one hand, at the age of 18 years, 3 months and 2 days, he suffered a severe fracture of the leg maliciously inflicted on him, which led to a fatal inflammation, which you call blood poisoning, And then, on the other hand, a thin metal needle was driven through one eye into his brain, and he was thus murdered. The father of the child king was Akhenaten or Amenophis IV, who was also his father-in-law since Tutankhamun married a daughter of Akhenaten, who in turn was his sister. Tutankhamun's mother was Nefertiti, Akhenaton's or Amenophis III's wife. Nefertiti was the second mother.
Why was Tutankhamun murdered? Second mother probably means stepmother.
Yes. The perpetrator of the murder was Haramhab, who was supreme ruler and senior minister under Tutankhamun. His mind and aspirations were to become the ruler of Egypt himself, which he actually succeeded in doing after Tutankhamun's assassination, so that he inherited the legacy of the murdered man, and as the last ruler of the 18th dynasty, laid the foundations for Egypt's rebirth. He attained the throne by marrying a sister of Nefertiti.
I have never heard of that before.
These real connections are still unknown to earthly scientists.
Then special thanks for your explanations. Here, these are 3 drafts to find people who could translate our writings and books into other languages. Please read through them and tell me which draft we should use.
Gladly, this time I want to read the lines myself. I like this draft here. It says everything that has to be said.
Thank you, then this one. But do you not find it a bit extensive?
No, it is just in the right frame. It is also clear and understandable.
So be it. Then I have here a draft for a book introduction, namely for the Japanese translation of my book Aus den Tiefen des Weltenraums. The translation of the work will soon be finished.
Let me see. Although I know that certain difficulties will arise with regard to the publication of the book in Japanese, I cannot yet explain them in more detail because I do not yet have any more precise information in this regard. Nevertheless, I am interested in your written introduction.
Difficulties? Why?
I already said that I do not have any further information yet that would allow me to explain it in more detail.
Yes, of course, that is what you said. I was a little absent with my thoughts or something else.
What were you thinking about?
I was already dealing with the next questions related to the things that Quetzal had to clarify.
Something that was not very easy because the center's crystal had to be removed for 3 days and brought to Quetzal, who had to make some changes to it. For the time being, a replacement had been installed, from which the records were later transferred to the core block so that there were no interruptions.
The block was actually beamed out? It would have taken me hours to chisel it out.
Appeal to all responsible people.
The UFO concerns of Billy Edward Albert Meier are only a small part of the tip of an enormous iceberg which hides the teaching of the truth of creation and its laws and recommendations. Billy Edward Albert Meier's task is to convey this teaching to Earth humans. The whole knowledge and the whole truth are extremely extensive and of profound importance for every human being. Consequently, everything must be grasped in its entirety and made accessible to all human beings. However, this requires a lot of work and also a lot of necessary capital. Therefore, the FIGU is looking for persons interested in the creational natural truth who are willing to translate the writings and books of the Free Interest Group for Frontier and Spiritual Sciences and Ufology Studies, FIGU, into the most diverse languages free of charge, and to find publishers as well as donors through whom translated works can be printed and distributed. The efforts in this regard, however, must come exclusively from the persons interested, since Figu does not see itself in a position to do this in terms of work and finances, and it is also not its task. With regard to the production of publications and books, as well as their printing and distribution, the Figu is solely responsible for the German-speaking area, while other languages and countries must be found by interested parties. For the translation of the writings and books, it is necessary to have a perfect command of both the German and the translation language, and to study and understand the contents of the writings and books thoroughly, which presupposes an in-depth study, at least with regard to the teaching of the creational natural truth connected with everything. The doctrinal writings and textbooks may only be translated from the original German language into a foreign language. And when the works are printed, the condition is that the original German text must be placed opposite the translation page. This is intended, on the one hand, to prevent falsifications from appearing, and, on the other hand, to ensure that a constant check can be carried out and made possible on the basis of the original text. This alone guarantees a certain security that falsifications and new false teachings do not arise, as unfortunately has happened worldwide with the most diverse written works and their ideologies since time immemorial. Translations from the original German text into other languages can only be carried out if the languages of translation, as well as the German language, are perfectly mastered, as has already been explained, and if the material to be translated is basically understood and can also be interpreted into the language to be translated. If all the above requirements can be met, please contact us if you are interested, either at the address Figu, Simya, Say, Silver Star Center, CH 8495, Schmidruti, Switzerland, or via Internet, InfoView Figu. She, with the note Übersetzungen. After a detailed clarification of all necessary matters, Figu will be happy to provide a free copy of the text or book that is the subject of the translation interest. In the first instance, we aim to provide translations in the following languages: English, French, Italian, Spanish, Swedish, Portuguese, Dutch, and Russian, but also Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, Korean, Czech, Polish, Slovak, and Chinese, etc. Help the Figu through your valued cooperation, if you are able and empowered to do so, to promote the spreading of the creational natural truth with its laws and recommendations, and to support Billy Edgeworth Albert Meier and the Figu mission, both of which provide important services for the evolution of Earth humans, so that slowly but surely true love, freedom, wisdom, and harmony, as well as knowledge and peace, can unfold among the human beings of Earth.
Figu Internet. Figu.org, Semi-AC, Silver Star Center Hinterschmidruti. Email, ch8495. Schmidruti, Switzerland Info Figu. Choke, according to Pathard, February 2000.
Your assumption corresponds to correctness. But let me now read your draft introduction.
Introduction.
Dear fellow readers, I have not written the present book with the intention of adding another similar work to a whole series of book publications on the subject of UFOs, such as can be found on the book market worldwide in hundreds or even thousands of editions. In contrast to these many books by various authors, there are no religious facts in my work that speak of alleged deities, dogmas, sin and punishment, and the like. My statements exclusively present facts which, on the one hand, have happened in my life as a contact person with the Pleiadians, Pleiaren, and which, on the other hand, are also based on effective statements of the extraterrestrials. All in all, these are facts of events which may seem more or less fantastic to some human beings, but which nevertheless correspond to truth and reality. And with my book, I would like to make these facts and events, as well as other important information, values, and occurrences, also accessible to you in your mother tongue. But this was only made possible by the extremely great efforts of Figu Japan, which has been working for years for the translation and dissemination of those things and values which I have to create and disseminate according to my mission, the teaching of the Spirit, which is the teaching of the existence of creation and its laws and recommendations. Creation is not God, but the elemental power of all existence and of all becoming and passing away and becoming again through rebirth. The nature of creation is purest energy, endowed with its own consciousness, which is immeasurable and endlessly creative, as taught by the doctrine of spirit, that is to say, the teaching of mind, which comprises a major part of my work. It is now a very special honor that this book from the depths of world space has also become accessible to you, dear fellow human beings in Japan, in your mother tongue, and you have the opportunity to learn the story of my contacts with the extraterrestrials of the Pleiadian Plejaren, as well as the nature of my mission. You have bought my work because you too are concerned about the purpose and meaning of life, and about the possibility of the existence of extraterrestrial human life. With this book you will learn about the how, the what, the where, and the why, and thus you will get many answers to many questions that you are certainly concerned with. The book thereby speaks about a truth that moves many millions and even billions of human beings, which is why the work will certainly find your full attention if you remain neutral towards the truth and the facts, and open your consciousness in this sense in order to let the realization, the knowledge and the truthfulness of authenticity and reality flow into you. In this sense, I wish you much comfort, knowledge, joy, and satisfaction in reading my book. Billy Edward A. Meier. From the heavens on high they come, far from the vast sea of stars, human beings like us, from the universe to teach us on the globe of Earth. Nice saying the test. Do I just stand here as Billy?
I also like this design. I see it is the same typography as the first draft. Therefore, the first writing should also come from your efforts.
But you also notice everything, my friend. But now let us talk about the other things that have arisen from Quetzal's efforts. Give him my sincere thanks. I am sure it has been a lot of work for him to fulfill my wishes.
He was extremely busy for 3 days, judging by everything you asked him to do. But he has done much more to achieve enormous relief, which I am sure you will all be very happy about.
Is it possible, in terms of time, that I can put these things on paper with the typewriter? It would be so much easier for me to write everything down exactly than if I had to call it up and record it later.
I have enough time to dictate everything you need.
Well, then we can start right away. But a short question. With regard to all the other things that were not mentioned in my questions and wishes, should I know whether everything will remain as it has always been?
Innovations exist only in the relationship as I will dictate them to you. Everything else remains as it was before your questions and wishes.
Understood. Then we can start now.
The facts of the innovations are now as follows.
Sentence 79-103. Purely core group internal issues.
Regulation by Quetzal, valid as of 3rd of February 2000. Duration of the weekends. Our indicated times correspond to the attendance times. First weekend. January, February, March. Friday, 20/023. 0 hours or later if group decides Saturday. Read. 0 hours end of the General Assembly Sunday. 13. EO 0 hours, and according to group decision April to December. 022. 30 hours or later if group decides Saturday. 0 hours, end of the AGM Sunday. 0 hours, end according to group decision third weekend. January to Saturday. 18. That's 22. 0 hours or later if group decides Sunday. 19 there's hours. End, according to group decision. More time is needed on Friday than for all the other months from April to December in terms of the control and impulse work, etc. that is carried out. This regulation is made in such a way that on Sunday after the last meditation, all tasks are completed and no additional time has to be taken up, which would then be taken away from the night's rest, since as a rule, work has to be done again on Monday to earn a living. Important third weekend. The third weekend is just as compulsory as the first weekend, so the same rules apply to it as those set out above. See absences. By mistake, the third weekend was gradually handled a bit casually by the group, which is why absences were made possible for all sorts of things, which is not compatible with the obligation. In future, absences can only be tolerated within the framework of the established rules, as the hours of the third weekend are also required for special control and impulse work. This has unfortunately been forgotten over time, which is why it should now be noted in the manual. Third weekend, April to December. Saturday, 18:30 hours. End according to group decision Sunday. 19 Sakars hours. End according to group decision activities and tasks outside these times that are decided by individual or subgroup regulations, E. Gene overpopulation groups fall outside the regular attendance time compulsory attendance. Please note, in order to avoid any travel stress and the like at the start of attendance time, we request that you make your way to the center early so that you do not have to rush at the same time. It is requested that you arrive at the center at least 15-30 minutes before the attendance time. These statements correspond to Quetzal's detailed explanations.
That is far more than I had hoped. The whole thing brings us tremendous relief.
That was also in Quetzal's sense.
Why was this not done from the beginning? I could have saved myself months of work and a lot of effort.
That was also my question to Quetzal, but as he explained, the possibility for this relief was only created over the last few years by storing a certain amount of impulse values in the core block.
I see. Then there are no further questions related to this for me, because I think I know how the facts are.
I also think that you understand what values and efforts, etc. are involved.
Then we can master another question that comes up again and again. It is the problem of the light tunnel that is created when people die. So why do people who are close to death see a light tunnel? Again and again one hears or reads that dying people lying in agony see a shining light tunnel. What is the reason for this? You, who, in addition to almost 36 other professions, also learned the profession of a doctor, will certainly have an explanation for this, I think.
The answer can be found in the brain itself. If the brain is no longer sufficiently supplied with oxygen, and this is the case with the agony period before death, the nerve cells that guarantee vision begin to react uncontrollably. This produces the appearance of light rays or radiant light. Since more nerve cells are located in the center of the human field of vision than at the edges, the faked light appears much stronger in the center of the eye. This creates the actual tunnel effect, which we also call agony light and agony tunnel.
How is it then that in such moments any figures, human beings and relatives, etc. are seen? In any case, this is repeatedly reported by persons who were already in the state of agony. Can it be that these humans, who erroneously say that they were already dead and came back from the realm of the dead, imagine these figures or humans and relatives, etc., in the agony tunnel or light tunnel solely by their faith and their desires, as well as by their fantasies? That is what my reason tells me.
which does not deceive you, for in fact it is as you have just expressed it.
Well then, I would just like to say that, according to my intellectual knowledge, it is impossible that when a person really dies, that they can then come back to life. This is precisely the case when the spirit form has actually left the material body, for a spirit form that has once escaped the body never returns to the dead body. Consequently, all statements and assertions of those who were supposedly dead and began to live again are false. I see the matter in such a manner that all these humans only lingered in a state of deep stagnation and thus had not yet crossed the threshold to death. They only stood at the threshold of death and fought for the survival of life and against death, as the term agony also says. Death struggle.
There is no need for further explanations, for you have called the facts as they correspond to reality.
That answers my last question.
Then we can turn to personal matters. I can still stay here for some time before I have to do my duties again. I have a question.